Hello, my name is Yanyun. I'm a visual artist, and today I'm your host for Artists at Home. Today we're going to explore using charcoal in different ways. And if you haven't seen the previous two videos in the last 2 weeks, do check it out. We've used charcoal to do gestural drawings. We have also used charcoal to create a sense of light and shadow. So charcoal is my go-to medium because of how flexible it is. And you can also change charcoal to work with it as if it's paint, which is very unlike its powdery kind of texture, and also the kind of that you often find, which is in stick. So can you guess what we're going to mix charcoal with today? For the materials today, you'll need a piece of paper. You may or may not need something to look at because today's one is kind of experimental, but I like my flowers, so they're still there. This is charcoal powder, which you're going to need, and if you don't have charcoal powder at home, not to worry, all you need is your charcoal sticks, which you can then pound into powder form. You will also need paintbrushes of various sizes. You will need your charcoal sticks, again different sizes if you like. You need your kneadable eraser. So a kneadable eraser is an eraser that you can knead into different shapes, and 2 containers. You need a container that's empty, dry and empty, and you need a container that has a little bit of water. So let's pick up our materials and try out a few lines just to practice. We're going to draw just a couple of lines with different sort of tools we'll be using. So I'm going to use the small stick first. So I'm going to draw a very light line. This is the lightest line that I can draw. You almost can't see it, but it's a very light line. Now I'm going to press it really hard and see the hardest line, the darkest line that I can draw. I'm going to hold the paper here and I'm going to draw a line. So look at the difference between how dark it is and how light it is right here. So this is the lightest line, darkest line. Next thing I'm going to do is, my stick is not that long, but you can actually draw with the side of it. So I'm going to draw another line here. I'm going to press and drag across. And let's see what we have. So my fingers were at the top part, so there was more pressure here. I'm just going to go through that line again. Da, 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 da. So you can actually draw very thick strokes. And don't forget, you can break the stick. So here is a different kind of line with just the broken bit of the stick. Also, lines don't have to be consistent. You can turn the stick as you draw. So you can start off with the side to make a thin line, turn it, turn it, turn it, that's it. So you can actually try out different things with your tool. So again, I'm going to do another one where it starts off thick line, thin line, thick line, thin line, different kinds of lines. So these are things you can do with the charcoal. Same thing, whether your charcoal is big, you can do the same thing. You know, just kind of go thin and thick, let it turn. And also you can draw very light lines. The same thing, really light line. Dragging it across. Okay, now we're going to try with the paintbrushes. Same thing. If you want, always just put the paintbrushes in water, then dab into the charcoal. That's right here. Up. Then my fan brush is really big, so you can actually turn as you draw a line. So I'm going to turn it to the side first. You draw a thin line, open it up, and don't press. Just let it drag on the paper. Create different kinds of texture. If you do drag it and press it down, then you get a very thick stroke that gets lighter on the end. If you want something lighter, it's not about pressing hard or soft anymore, but actually adding more water. So I'm just going to add more water here. And as I draw a line here, look at how faint it is now. Very different from the previous stroke. So this is more water, more charcoal. Again, even with the light and heavy, you can actually dip the paintbrush in the water. Only put charcoal on one side of the paintbrush so that you can do variety. So I'm going to start off light, and I'm going to turn it dark, turn it round, back into light again. So try it out with all your different tools, see what kinds of lines you can make. Remember, you can go really light or very heavy, and you can mix water with the charcoal powder to to create different types of inks. Okay, without further ado, let's begin. We're going to start preparing our materials first. So I'm going to take my charcoal powder. I'm going to put some in a little container. So I'll shake it out so that the powders don't clump together. Now I'm going to choose a brush, and you can choose whichever brush you'd like. So I'm going to get the thick one. And what I'm going to do is have my water next to me. I'm going to dab the brush in the water first, and then I'm going to put it into the powders and mix it a little bit. So you would see that the powder on my brush is slightly wet, and you can go back and forth and your water will just kind of get a bit dusty. Now the fun thing of doing this is now you can treat charcoal as if it's ink. So I'm going to use my reference again, same batch of flowers, and I'm going to just make some fun strokes. So let's see how this goes. Just kind of do little splotches, because I want to draw that flower in the middle, and then just sort of paint this way and that way. You can turn the brush as you paint, you create different kinds of lines. I like this big broad flower, and I have to find a way to do it. And if you don't want the charcoals to be too dark, you can add a bit more water. Again, it's kind of like using what we were doing the last 2 weeks, which is gesture drawing. But this time you sort of paint the thing that you are looking at, or not looking at, or just come up with random lines. You don't have to worry too much about what you're doing. The fun thing is you can always turn your brush as you draw, and you'll create different shapes. And you're not pressing and drawing every single outline. You're just letting the brush do interesting shapes for you. You can let it just go do squiggles. You can do little lines, change the line directions. You know, you can just kind of go a bit wild and fun with the strokes. But again, I'm still using the concepts of gesture because I want my lines to keep changing. I don't want them all to be the same. But you see also that I don't really draw the outlines of things. Okay, now I'm just blocking in some very, very large darker areas just to create the sense of shape. I also want to add a little bit of shadow, again, like our shadow and light. There's a leaf in the corner here that I really like the shape of, so I'm going to try to paint it out. Here, there's another one. It kind of goes this way, and then this way. A lot of details in here, but I don't think I'll be able to do too much of it. So just have fun with using it as ink, and don't worry about the mistakes that you make. And just explore how you can actually paint. Meanwhile, I might want to change my brush, so I'll put it right here. Just be careful, don't get your table too messy. Change to a different kind of brush. Again, dip it in water, dip it in the charcoal, and then now with a sharper brush, I can actually draw more details, smaller lines. Now I'm just going to let the brush roll around and let the brush do the work for you. And also make it lighter. So remember, we can do light and shadow as well. So this means you can actually use some more water to paint without dipping it in the charcoal. The strokes will be a lot lighter. Okay, so I have some details here. Now I want some darkness in here. Just want to kind of bring up a little bit of the strokes up here. Get some of the strokes up here, so otherwise it'll be too empty in this area. I really like this one here, but I want it to be slightly darker. Too many little repeating lines, so I'm just kind of blending it in here a little bit. Alright, then on this side, where there is that dark center, I kind of want to do a bit more of the outlines for this flower here, and also to bring out line works for the chrysanthemums right down here. Adding kind of a few strokes here and there to create movement again. So I might want to add some of the lines of the leaves here. I want to add a bit more details here. Also within the shadows, right now it's just one giant block. I might add a few leaves in there. leaf down here. So have fun, treat it like ink, and of course not forgetting the vase. So right now all I can see of the vase is just a little bit at the ends. Again, I like to keep things a little bit open, and there's a little bit sort of shadow right here. And also, just to kind of carve out the shape a bit better, I'll just draw the top rim of the vase. And then add a few details in here. I want to do some, if you want, splatter a bit. So this one works better with the fan brush. And you add the charcoal and just go tap, tap, tap. So it creates a little bit of texture. Slight difference. You can also use your toothbrush. If you want to add some different kinds of strokes, you can do different things. For me, this one will not make it too crazy. So I'll just use my fan brush to dab just a little bit. So right now there's a lot of little textures that's happening in the shadows. There are long lines to create the gesture of the flowers, and also it doesn't look like charcoal at all. So we'll wait for it to dry a little bit later, is to actually use your kneadable eraser to pick out some lights from the shadow part, because this is simply water, and when the charcoal kind of water dries, it just becomes charcoal. So let's just wait a little bit until it dries, and then we will see what we can do with the kneadable eraser. So now the paper is dry, and now we're going to try to see what we can do with the kneadable eraser on this drawing. So I'm going to add a bit of light in this very dark area. It's a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to pick up some lights. It's working very well. So when you use a kneadable eraser to draw, it will actually pick up the dry charcoal, and you can actually add some strokes in it. It's cool. So I don't need a lot, just going to add a little bit, but it will never get too white. So you see here, this is as light as it can go. So remember, if you do want certain areas to be white, make sure that you don't add any charcoal there. Okay, just to add some textures around, so that it's a bit more dynamic. Also, if you actually want to add some grey areas but you don't want it wet, you can actually go back to your powders again, take a dry brush, and sort of powder in some brush strokes. It's almost like creating shadows. And these parts you can actually erase off easily. So I'm just going to add a little bit in certain areas, just sort of quick dust of it. Draw a stroke here, so it's more consistent. I can actually pick out the lights again. So you can always go back and forth with a drawing. But remember, if you don't want certain areas to get any charcoal, don't paint on it. So just to create a little bit of softness. Another thing you can do is actually use your fingers. And these areas will be just kind of grey. I want to grey out this area a little bit more. At the same time, I want some strokes in here, some lines in here. Maybe just some lines in here. And it'll give you a nice variety of strokes and fun things to work with. It works nicely with all the spots of ink that we have dabbed earlier as well. And then kind of combined effort. That's it from me. Okay, so for a quick roundup of the techniques that we've used for this drawing, we use charcoal powder with water and different types of brushes to sort of draw out interesting shape and lines to create the drawing, and then we had to wait for it to dry. And the moment it dried, we could use a kneadable eraser to pick out some of the lights, or also use dry charcoal powder to add on some grey tones. I've also used a brush that is dry to sort of give it extra strokes, and also my finger to blur out certain parts. So this is quite a fun different exercise that makes use of charcoal and water to create a kind of inky sort of look. And this is the end of our charcoal series for artists at home. I hope you enjoyed the videos and I hope you are having fun making different drawings using charcoal, using the technique of gesture, light and shadow, as well as mixing water with charcoal to make inky drawings.